Independence Day weekend was one for the history books, not only with the signing of the One Big Beautiful Bill, but as we were just talking about, the deadly floods in Texas. And those weren't the only news items that created a stir. Here to discuss some of those other headlines is Suzanne Bowdey, editorial director and senior writer at the Washington Stand, and Casey Harper, managing editor of the broadcast of the Washington Stand. Suzanne, Casey, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thanks, Tony.
Thanks.
All right. Let me just, we were just discussing with Chip Roy, the flooding in Texas. It just seems like we get these natural disasters. And, of course, Louisiana, we seem to be somewhat familiar with these. But this tragic loss of life, and Chip made reference to this, how people across the aisle, it's one of those moments where it kind of brings back the humanity. It peels back all the political rhetoric and the hostility that we see in this city a lot. And it reminds us we're all human beings.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's also that so many people are parents too. And the first thing you think is, if my kid was in that water, I mean, I'd be among the bodies because I'd be diving in. Yeah. And I think that's the reaction. It's one of the few things that unites us. Of course, plenty of people did make it political. And I've refrained online and Twitter from trying to retort back because it just felt a bad spirit on it. And there is a political angle to it, and we can talk about how FEMA money was misspent in the last administration and things like that. But I don't think that's what the focus should be now. It's on the unity and coming together.
I think you can look at those things after the fact.
Right.
I think that now it's the families that are suffering. And, when we, 9 years ago, we went through the floods in Louisiana, and we didn't have near the loss of life that we saw here in Texas, because it was a different type of flooding. But the families, their futures are completely altered forever. And it changes communities. Our community is still changed from the flood with the devastation that took place. But it's just, it is a time, I think, as Christians, we need to pray, to empathize, but to be introspective of what really matters in life.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, it reminds me of Jesus' parable about where you're building your foundation. Obviously, it's a metaphorical parable of the wind and the rains coming, but when tragedy strikes, whether it's a flood or any other kind of thing, it reveals what's under the surface. And if you have a deeper foundation to cling to, then you might be able to make it through something even as terrible as this. But if you don't, I don't know where you turn. I mean, you're done. If you don't have Jesus and something like that happens to your kids, it's over.
Even then, it can change.
It's unbearable.
Tonight, actually right now, I think President Trump and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are meeting to discuss a permanent peace agreement, or winding down the war in Gaza. Also, we're expecting a wide range of issues to be discussed, including expansion of the Abraham Accords, and some are concerned. You heard we had former Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann on discussing in the past that's always resulted in Israel having to promise to give up land or to somehow trade land for peace. Something different has happened this time, where we actually have family leaders in Judea and Samaria, in Hebron in particular, which is in Judea, saying, hey, we don't want to be a part of the Palestinian Authority. We want to join the Abraham Accords. This is a game changer, I think.
It is, and I think we're at a really unique time in history right now. You have Trump as this ultimate peacemaker. You also have Israel finally being able to attack and expose some of the really corrupt regimes that have been leading places like Gaza and the Palestinian state. You have Iran, all of these people who are repressing their own nation. And we're starting to peel back the layers and see what's actually going on. And this movement sort of these 5 sheikhs that you talked about in Hebron, very significant in that they're saying, the Palestinian Authority has been awful for a long time. They've taxed us. They don't understand our traditions. They don't actually care what the people think. They've just ruled with an iron fist, and we want out. And we see this opportunity with Trump at the helm to finally make this change. And what they're proposing is truly groundbreaking. I mean, they're saying we will basically secede from the Palestinian Authority, break off, form their own emirate. So this little tiny pocket would be not beholden to the PA, and then join the Abraham Accords.
Yeah, what's interesting is that's really how the Middle East functioned for millennia, really. I mean, it was just tribes, families, and in fact, last year I met with one of these sheikhs, and they were, I didn't know how they were going to get this off the ground because it was so dangerous for them even to meet with us because of the Palestinian Authority. But it's gotten so repressive for the people, and the corruption is so bad that they're willing to take these risks. And it is interesting that the family structure, they believe, and it is tight, but in the Arab community, the family structure is tighter than these political organizations.
Right, and I think everyone agrees that at this point, this two-state solution, as everybody's been calling it, is dead, and they're looking for a way to actually get out.
They acknowledge this. They have signed a letter pledging peace and full recognition of Israel as a Jewish state. Now, that in itself is
monumental,
unheard of, because none of the other countries would recognize. That's what the Abraham Accords were, recognizing Israel's right to exist. They're saying, hey, we know that a two-state solution is not possible, especially after October the 7th. They're making the argument that we've made, that here's a landmass about 24 times the size of Gaza in the heart of Israel. Who would be dumb enough to allow a Palestinian state in the heart of their country?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I love your point about the families being so strong even when the political breaks down, because that's really, faith, family, freedom. We show that, if families can stick together, we can weather a lot of political things. Also, another point on this is it's really refreshing to see some honesty in an area of the world filled with propaganda and just constant lying about our enemies are evil and we're the best, and constant lying about Israel, and Iran saying they won the war after being totally decimated. This is kind of laughable lying, but to see someone in this part of Palestine saying, actually, the Palestinian Authority has been terrible to us. I mean, you think about the things that they're guilty of. They steal foreign aid. They steal most of the foreign aid. We don't really know the percentages because of the way it works there. But all this foreign aid that's been pouring in, they take it, they use it to buy weapons, to fuel terrorism.
Right. They pay the terrorists. It's pay to slay. They're continuing to indoctrinate the children to hate Jews. And it's had a consequence.
It works?
Well, it works, but it also it depresses the economy. There's no jobs. The sheikhs recognize that there's no place for our people to work. We need Israel. We want this relationship. We've seen the same thing in Ariel, in Samaria, where it is the manufacturing that comes in, oftentimes by Jewish companies, but they employ the Arabs, and they like it, because they have an income and they can provide for their family. So I think part of it's gotten so bad that the people, like what we're hoping will happen in Iran, will rise up against this imposed regime, in this case the Palestinian Authority, that's been put upon the people by the Oslo Accords.
But I'm also interested, now you've talked a lot on the show about Judea and Samaria. What is that? I mean, the backdrop of this is also so interesting, because here we are talking about, Michelle Bachmann saying, don't cede this land. And here are these guys from this land saying, we want to join the Abraham Accords. We're with you.
Well, it's interesting. Hebron is where the cave of Machpelah is actually at, that Abraham bought to bury Sarah. Wow. So it's actually one of the areas in Scripture, one of 4 areas in Scripture that we actually have a recorded deed of the land being purchased there in Hebron. And so when I was actually there last time, I was in Hebron a few months ago and met with the mayor there, and there was some discussion about it's bifurcated, where you have a small Jewish community there, but it's basically the city is run by the Palestinians. But these families could quickly and I think more effectively govern. Now, it's going to be a little complicated in how does Israel absorb them? What are they? What kind of what kind of status do they have as citizens? Are they?
How do you manage all these little towns?
But I wonder. I was thinking about this as I was reading through it, because this is all relatively new. If it couldn't be treated as we treat like Indian reservations here in the United States, where they have sovereign jurisdiction in their areas, but they're not another country.
Right. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we have like Puerto Rico, for instance. Actually, I think the effect, when you think about the effect it would have on the rest of Palestine, to me it's reminiscent of something like Hong Kong, where you have a whole country that has one way of thinking, and then you have a pocket that adopts another way, and then the small minority pocket ends up sort of disproving the larger group.
I think what the sheikhs would want is the Israeli government to provide basic services
and protection.
Mm-hmm. They don't want an army. They would probably prefer the Israeli police force.
And they don't have infrastructure a lot of times.
Yeah, well, actually in Hebron, in some of these areas, they're having to bring water in from the outside because they
denied it.
Yeah, they're just Anyway, it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. I think we're at a very unique period in time. It's something that we need to be prayerful about as the expansion of the Abraham Accords. But as Michelle was talking about earlier, can't be a trade land for peace. That's proven to be ineffective.
And I think you have a column about that on the Washington Stand right now.
I wrote
Perkins.
That's right. You can go to the Washington Stand and see that and see what I'm thinking about that if you haven't heard enough from me. All right, we got a few minutes left. I want to talk a little bit more on domestic news. A day after the White House celebrated Independence Day and the signing of the reconciliation bill, Elon Musk had some news of his own to share that he is launching the America Party.
I will say, Elon it's sort of cute. Bless his heart. He's so new to politics. I don't think he knows what to do with all of his frustration. Now, I've watched you through years be frustrated with the Republican Party. I mean, it could be, even as recently as last year. Now, right. So this is nothing new to those of us that have been in politics, and I think he just doesn't know how to process it, so he's like, let's start a third party. Well, I've heard you over the years. You've been disgusted. We've bantered about what do we do, but it's not a viable solution. And in his case, who is going to join this party? The liberals don't like him. He's a traitor to the liberals. The MAGA crowd dislikes him. There might be a tiny sliver of Republicans that would go for it. But even then, Elon Musk, like SpaceX.
I'm just not sure where he finds a constituency.
Right.
Because he's if I put him in any category, it'd be libertarian.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's already a libertarian party.
Right.
Well, but they're kind of he doesn't fit the libertarian party.
True.
He really has a slice of the MAGA crowd, but the MAGA crowd's not leaving.
No.
And they're going to stick with him. The establishment is not happy in the Republican Party, but they're not going to go there either. So he has no constituency.
And you need a significant ground game to get a party like that. It's a lot of...
It takes more than X.
It's a lot of paper. If he gets frustrated, who's going to be running this party? If he's like, well, I'm going to go back to Tesla and I'm going to go launch my rockets, who's going to be in charge?
I know that in the process, even when he was running Doge and when he first came in, I did not have these direct conversations, but those that did have those conversations shared with me. He just had no understanding of how government functioned, which was obvious by some of the statements that he made. And government was designed by our founders to be slow and to be hard to change, because that's for our own protection. Now, it's gotten so bad because over years of neglect, it has gotten way, way out of whack. But we have to do the hard work of bringing it back. And, I think we have to work within the structure. Yes, I remain frustrated with the Republican Party. But that's why we're here. We agitate. And just think if we weren't agitating, if we weren't pushing and prodding and telling them to do more, what it would really be like.
Well, and look at what the House Freedom Caucus has done. There are elements of the Republican Party that have done a lot to move the needle.
And the Freedom Caucus began in our conference room.
Right.
So, that's how you move the process over time. Accountability, encouragement. It takes everybody kind of working together with a common vision of a nation that, as we see here, one nation under God, indivisible, with justice and liberty for all.